to start today with a number that, honestly, it just stopped me cold this morning. I was reading through the stack for this week, and one figure just jumped off the page. 254,000.
It is a staggering figure. But without context, it's just a number, isn't it? It's hard to feel the weight of it.
Exactly. So I tried to, visualize it. 254,000 is more than the entire population of Southampton.
Wow.
Just imagine walking through a city that size. Every single person you pass, every child on a playground, every shopkeeper is someone on the waiting list for an autism assessment in the UK right now.
And that's a really important clarification. That isn't the list for support or therapy.
Right.
That is just the queue to get through the front door, to even ask the question, am I autistic?
It's absolutely massive.
Right.
Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a heavy, but I think an incredibly important stack of documents today. We are looking at a specific moment this week, mid-February 2026.
And it feels like a pivotal one.
It really does. If you've been watching the neurodiversity space, you know this isn't just a standard news week. It feels like a mobilization.
It's a convergence, I think. You've got this pressure from the health system, that front door crisis you just mentioned. But then on the other side, there's this huge political battle brewing over education and send reform.
Right. So our mission today is to connect those dots. We're going to unpack this lost learning crisis, figure out what these red lines are that charities are drawing for the government, and look at some really fascinating new research too.
It's about seeing the whole ecosystem. You can't look at that waiting list in isolation from what's happening in classrooms or what's happening in the courts. It's all one interconnected system that, frankly, seems to be at a breaking point.
Okay, so let's start there with that front door crisis. 254,000 people. This data is from the National Autistic Society, and they are flagging this as a full-blown emergency.
They are, and for good reason. You have to look at the official targets versus the reality. The NHS guidelines, the rule book, essentially, says the maximum wait for an assessment should be 3 months.
3 months, that's the pledge. Sounds reasonable, but what's the reality?
The reality is that 90% of people are waiting longer than that. And we're not talking, a couple of weeks longer.
No.
We're talking years. People waiting years in limbo.
And this is where it gets really serious. There's a report from Bournemouth University that the NASNIC is citing, and this is where it shifts from, admin backlog to something much, much darker.
Yes, and we have to talk about this. The Bournemouth study draws a direct line between these diagnostic delays and suicide risk. And this isn't a small focus group. They had 4,000 respondents.
That's a huge data set for this kind of research.
It is. They spoke to autistic adults, but they also tragically interviewed families bereaved by suicide. The findings are stark. A lack of access to diagnosis correlates with a deterioration in mental health that can be fatal.
I think for a long time, the narrative was that a diagnosis is just a label. Why do you need a piece of paper to tell you who you are?
Exactly. But this just flips that on its head. For so many people, that label is the key. It's a key to self-understanding. Without it, you're left blaming yourself, thinking, why am I broken? Why can't I cope?
Instead of, oh, my brain just works differently.
Precisely. And that internal friction, over years, it creates a despair that is genuinely dangerous.
So you've got a city-sized waiting list. You've got data showing that waiting is dangerous. You would assume this is priority number one for the health department.
You would think so. But this is where the sector's frustration is just boiling over. According to the NES, the NHS 10-year plan, the blueprint for the future of healthcare, has no specific mention of autism.
Wait, none. In the entire plan.
Not specifically. And on top of that, there's no new autism strategy and development. It's this massive disconnect between the reality on the ground and the policy priorities at the top.
It's like the data is screaming, but the strategy is silent.
That's a very good way to put it. And while the health system is stalled, the education system is, it's facing its own crisis.
Which brings us to the lost learning crisis. This is a huge campaign launching this week from Ambitious About Autism. They're calling it the Absence Notes campaign.
Which is very clever branding.
It is, isn't it? It plays on that idea of a parent writing a sick note, but they're flipping it.
The branding is clever, but the stats behind it are brutal. They're reporting that over 70% of autistic young people have experienced some form of lost learning.
Okay, we need to pause there. Because when I hear lost learning or absence, my brain immediately goes to truancy.
Of course, and that's the misconception they want to smash. This is not truancy. This is about barriers. The young experts, the autistic young people advising the campaign, describe a system that physically and mentally repels them.
What does that look like in practice? What do they mean by that?
Well, it looks like unsuitable school placements. It looks like intense bullying. It looks like sensory environments, fluorescent lights, crashing bells, crowded corridors that cause actual physical pain and burnout.
There was a quote from one of them in the report that it really stuck with me. They said, walking through the school gates was like getting ready for battle.
That stopped me too. Just think about the physiology of that. If a child's brain is in survival mode at 8:30 a.m., flooded with cortisol,
You can't learn anything.
you can't learn algebra or Shakespeare when your nervous system is in fight or flight. You're just trying to survive the day. So Ambitious About Autism is framing this as burnout.
So the absence note campaign is asking the public to sign a collective absence note to the government.
It's a powerful inversion, isn't it? It's saying we are absent because the system isn't present for us, and it's getting traction. It's been on Sky News, the iPaper.
And they're linking it to this massive £6 billion black hole in SEND funding that everyone's talking about.
And that black hole brings us to the politics, because there's a joint letter that went out this week to the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson.
Ah, the Red Lines letter.
Exactly. And the tone here is very different. It's not just raising awareness, it's a warning.
Who's drawing these lines?
It's a coalition. The National Autistic Society, the Disabled Children's Partnership, and the context is that the government is trying to fix that £6 billion deficit.
And the charities are terrified. The fix will be to weaken the legal rights of disabled children to save money.
That's the fear. The red lines are basically them saying, reform the system, but you do not touch these core legal protections.
Like what, for example?
Well, right now, if a child has an education, health, and care plan, an EHCP, the local authority has a legal, statutory duty to provide the support in it. It's not optional.
It's the law.
It's the law. The fear is that that statutory right will be diluted into something like best effort.
So a school could just say, well, we tried, but we can't afford it.
And the parents would have no legal recourse. That's the nightmare scenario. It's a defensive stance, and it shows how high the stakes are.
So it feels like they're fighting on two fronts. One is begging for more resources, and the other is just frantically trying to hold on to the rights they already have.
It's a siege mentality. But if we step back from the immediate firefighting, there are organizations trying to fix the machinery itself, the boring stuff that actually makes things work, data and frameworks.
I love the boring stuff. That's where the real change happens. I was looking at the British Dyslexia Association's campaign, the BDA. They want something so obvious, I thought it was a mistake in the notes.
What's that?
They want the government to actually record dyslexia in education data sets.
It sounds so bureaucratic, doesn't it? But right now, there is no specific tick box for dyslexia in the national data collection for schools.
Which is wild to me. How can we not be tracking it?
That is the BDA's entire point. If you don't count it, it doesn't exist to the system. You can't track outcomes. You can't see if an intervention in Manchester is working better than one in London.
You can't manage what you don't measure.
The golden rule of policy. So that's fixing the input, the data. But there's also a shift in how we measure the output success. Which brings us to the Neuro-Inclusive Education Network, or NIN.
Right, formerly the Autism Education Trust. They got this thing called the Progression Framework.
It sounds a bit corporate, I know, but it's trying to solve a very specific problem for teachers. Traditionally, schools measure success with grades, SUPs, GCSEs,
The metrics.
But for a neurodivergent child, progress might look totally different.
So instead of, did you get an A in math, they're measuring what?
They're measuring things like, did the student advocate for their sensory needs today? Did they manage a transition between classes without anxiety? Did they understand a social cue that confused them last week?
Which are arguably much more important life skills for their long-term happiness.
I'd say so. But here's the strategic brilliance of this. The new Ofsted framework, the school inspectors, has a huge focus now on inclusion. Schools have to prove they're being inclusive.
Ah, I see. So the NEN is handing schools the tool. You need to prove inclusion. Here's a framework that generates the data you need.
Exactly. It aligns the best interests of the child with the survival instincts of the school. That's how you get real change. And they're backing it up with resources like the Autism Re-Explained video.
I saw a clip of this. It's made by Senkalu, who's also a parent.
That dual perspective is so important. It helps teachers understand that when a child is acting out, it's not bad behavior. It's a distress signal.
Speaking of changing culture, let's talk about lived experience.
Yeah.
There's a real shift towards research and voices from the community itself.
Which is vital. And we have to look at Autistica. They're the research arm of this movement. They just released a major update on that paracetamol controversy from last autumn.
Oh, right. I remember this. The claim from the Trump administration in the U.S. was that taking paracetamol in pregnancy was linked to autism.
Yes, and it terrified a lot of people because it's one of the few painkillers pregnant women are told is safe.
So what's the verdict?
Well, Autistica is highlighting a massive review by Professor Asma Khalil. We're talking data from hundreds of thousands of pregnancies.
It's old standard stuff.
The best you can get. And they found no link, no evidence to support the claim.
It's so important to have that myth-busting capability in the sector, isn't it?
It really is. Misinformation fills the void when facts are missing, and that noise can have real health consequences.
And looking at evidence also means looking at the whole lifespan. I was so interested to see ADHD UK pushing for research into areas we just don't associate with neurodiversity.
We picture an 8-year-old boy, don't we? Not a 50-year-old woman.
Exactly. So they've got research calls out looking at the intersection of neurodivergence with menopause and dementia.
Let's break that down. Menopause. King's College is looking at ADHD women aged 45 to 55. The theory is about estrogen. Estrogen impacts dopamine. ADHD is linked to dopamine.
So when estrogen drops during menopause,
They can hit ADHD women like a truck. Their medication might suddenly stop working. Their coping skills collapse. It's a hormonal interaction that's been a complete blind spot.
that makes so much sense. And dementia.
The University of Southampton is looking at the intersection there. Does neurodivergence protect you? Does it make you more vulnerable? Does dementia even look the same in an autistic brain? We just don't know because we've treated these as childhood conditions for so long.
It really hammers home that this is a whole life experience.
Which is reflected in the new ambassadors ADHD UK has announced. People like Natalie W. She's late diagnosed, mom of 2 autistic kids, and her whole thing is fighting for spaces where people are believed, not fixed.
Believed, not fixed. That really captures it, doesn't it?
It's a total shift from the old medical model of fixing a broken person. And then you have Haley, another ambassador, who talks about embracing the weird and reframing being too loud or too much.
I think so many people can relate to that. Being told you're too much your whole life.
Sit down, be quiet, stop fidgeting, and then finally realizing, oh, that's just how my brain works.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've covered a massive amount of ground.
We have.
We have the front door crisis. 250,000 people waiting with dangerous mental health consequences.
That's the immediate health crisis.
Then the education battleground, 70% lost learning, and this desperate fight to protect legal red lines in the SEND reforms.
That's the systemic legal fight.
And then we have the system shifters. Better data, better frameworks, better research into the whole lifespan.
When you lay it out like that, you see how big this moment is.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Why does this specific week matter so much?
It matters because the systems being debated right now, the SEND reform, the NHS plans, these aren't just tweaks. These are the foundations for the next decade. If those red lines are crossed, we are locking in a decade of failure.
But if these campaigns work,
If the absence note wakes up the government, we could see a genuine turning point. It feels like the community is done asking politely. They're bringing data, legal challenges, and the sheer weight of numbers.
they're mobilizing.
And that's the only way systemic change ever happens.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought on that. We talked about the absence note and that 70% figure. 70% of autistic youth missing out on learning.
The huge majority.
If 70% of a specific population cannot access a service, a building, a website, a school system, at what point do we stop saying the users are the problem?
That's the ultimate question, isn't it?
If the majority can't fit in the box, maybe we need to stop trying to cram them in and ask, is school itself the very concept of how we do education? A design failure that needs a complete rebuild from the ground up.
It suggests we're dealing with an architecture failure, not a student failure.
I think deep down we all know the answer. But getting the system to admit it, that's the hard part. Thank you so much for guiding us through this.
A pleasure, as always.
And thank you for listening. We'll catch you in the next deep dive.